Her boss said it like it was a joke. Except he wasn't smiling. I'm taking your wife as my date tonight. You can sit this one out. Crystal glasses. Low jazz. Gold lighting bouncing off the hotel ceiling. And my wife, she smiled. Not a nervous one. Not confused. Just smooth. It's just networking, she said. I pulled my phone out. Didn't announce it. Just hit record. You ever feel the air change temperature without the thermostat moving? That's what that ballroom felt like. Warm, but not the good kind. The kind that sits heavy in your collar. I didn't say anything right then. I don't raise my voice in public. Never have. My dad used to say, if you lose control in front of strangers, you never really had it. I don't know if that's true, but it stuck. Let me back up. Name's Mickle. Folks online call me Uncle Mickle. I'm 47, no, 46. I always had a year in my head. Maybe I'm tired. Doesn't matter. I've been married 15 years. 15 in a few months. Long enough that you stop keeping score of holidays and start keeping track of how the dishwasher sounds when it's about to quit. That kind of time. My wife works in corporate marketing. Big regional firm. High ceilings. Glass offices. Coffee that smells expensive but tastes burnt. I drive freight. Long hauls. Overnight runs. Diesel and rest stops and truck stop coffee that doesn't pretend to be anything it's not. Different worlds. But we made it work. At least I thought we did. The Gala was at one of those downtown hotels with marble floors that echo when you walk too hard. I remember the echo because I was aware of my boots. I almost wore dress shoes. Should have, probably. But she said it was fine. Business casual. That's what she told me. Business casual, apparently, meant tuxedos for everyone else. I stood out. I knew it. Not embarrassed exactly. Just noticeable. Her boss, Greg. Tall guy. Silver hair at the temples, like it was painted on. Navy tux. No tie. Confident without moving much. The kind of man who stands still and makes other people adjust. He came over with 2 glasses of champagne. Handed one to my wife. Looked at me like I was part of the catering staff. And then he said it. I'm taking your wife as my date tonight. You can sit this one out. It was light. On the surface. People around us chuckled. That corporate chuckle. The one that says, I'm laughing because I should. I looked at her. Waiting for the correction. Waiting for the eye roll. Something. She smoothed her dress instead. Green silk. I remember the fabric, because it caught the light like water. She said, it's just networking. Networking. That word felt rehearsed. I don't know why. Maybe I'm reading into it now. Maybe I wasn't thinking that clearly at the time. No, actually I was. I remember my hands were steady when I pulled my phone out. I didn't hold it up high. Just waist level. Camera angled slightly. The microphone pointed forward. I've hauled freight through snowstorms, with less tension in the air than that ballroom. And here's the part that still sits with me. The way Greg put his hand on the small of her back. Not grabbing. Not inappropriate enough to cause a scene. Just familiar. Too familiar. She didn't flinch. I told myself, it's business. These people are different. They air kiss and overlaugh, and say bold things because they're paid to be bold. But there's bold. And there's ownership. When they walked toward the center tables together, I stayed where I was for a second longer than I meant to. I could hear ice shifting in glasses behind me. Someone's perfume, too sweet, heavy vanilla, drifted past. I checked my phone screen. Recording. Red dot blinking. Part of me thought I was being ridiculous. Paranoid. The jealous husband who doesn't understand corporate culture. Another part of me felt something tighten low in my stomach. Not anger. Not yet. Just a sense that something had been stepped on. I followed them to the table. Sat down across from them. Greg was already telling a story about a merger. My wife leaned in when he spoke. Close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm. Maybe that's normal there. Maybe. But when he introduced her to another executive as my date for the evening, and she didn't correct him, didn't even laugh it off, I felt the floor shift a little. And that's when I knew. Something wasn't right. Not loud. Not obvious. Just wrong enough. I kept recording. Before that night, things felt steady. Not perfect. Just steady. We lived in a brick ranch house on the edge of town. Two-car garage that only fit one car because of the storage bins stacked along the wall. Her car always inside. My truck outside. Engine ticking as it cooled at 2 in the morning. Mornings were quiet. I'd get home when the sky was barely blue. She'd already be up, standing at the kitchen counter with her laptop open, hair clipped up, coffee steaming in one of those ceramic mugs from some conference in Denver. Or Dallas. I always mix those up. One of those D cities. She liked order. Lists on the fridge. Calendar alerts. Color-coded folders. I like routine. Same thermos. Same route. Same radio station fading in and out past the county line. We weren't dramatic people. We paid the mortgage. We replaced the water heater when it groaned. We argued about the thermostat in winter. She liked it warmer than I did. Said I carried Colden with me from the road. There were no slammed doors. No late-night screaming matches. No obvious cracks. That's what made it hard. She'd started talking about visibility about a year ago. Said she needed more exposure to upper management if she wanted to move up. I supported it. I did. I'd sit at the table and listen while she rehearsed presentation points, nodding even when I didn't understand the jargon. KPIs, stakeholder alignment, cross-functional synergy. It all sounded like machinery. Greg, her boss, came up in conversation more often around that time. Not in a secretive way, just frequent. Greg thinks I should lead the pitch. Greg said I'm ready for senior accounts. Greg wants me at the client dinner. I remember once asking, "Does he ever go home?" I meant it as a joke. She laughed, said he was divorced, married to the job. Divorced. That word didn't bother me then. Plenty of divorced people. I haul freight for half of them. But looking back, there were small shifts. Subtle ones. She bought new dresses. Not flashy. Just sharper cuts. More fitted. I noticed because she usually hated shopping. Said it was inefficient. Her phone started lighting up more in the evenings. She'd flip it face down when she was done reading something. I told myself that was normal too. Work never really shuts off anymore. And to be fair, I was gone a lot. 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. Different states. Different time zones. Sometimes I'd call her from a rest stop, and she'd sound distracted. Say she was finishing slides for Greg. I didn't question it. I trusted her. Let me rephrase that. I believed in the version of us I had in my head. That might be more accurate. We'd built 15 years on shared groceries and shared silence. That kind of foundation feels solid because it's quiet. No fireworks. No chaos. Just 2 people moving through space together. Maybe that was part of it. Corporate culture is different. I saw it at that gala even before Greg said what he said. The way people laughed too loudly. The way men touched elbows and shoulders like they were placing claims. The way wives, no, not wives, colleagues, stood angled just slightly toward power. I don't mean that as judgment. It's just an observation. At our house, power meant who remembered to pay the electric bill. At that hotel, power wore cufflinks. Halfway through the evening, before the comment, I remember thinking how out of place I felt. The carpet was thick, swallowed sound. I could smell roasted meat from the kitchen doors, swinging open and closed. Waiters moved like they were on rails. I watched my wife in that environment and wondered, quietly, if she was more comfortable there than at our kitchen table with the chipped edge. Have you ever looked at someone you've known for years and realized they move differently in another room? Like there's a version of them you only see in certain light? It wasn't dramatic. It was small. She laughed more freely there. Stood straighter. Talked faster. Used words I'd never heard her use at home. I told myself that's growth. That's ambition. That's good. And it is. It can be. But there was one moment earlier that night that I keep replaying. Greg came up behind her while she was talking to another manager. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood close. Close enough that his jacket brushed her shoulder blade. She didn't step forward. Maybe she didn't notice. Or maybe she was used to it. I'm not sure which bothers me more. I didn't react then. I took a sip of water. Couldn't even remember if it was sparkling or still. Actually, it was sparkling. I remember the bubbles hitting my nose. Small details stick. I've spent years on the road, learning to read situations fast. Weather shifts. Engine noises. The way another driver drifts half a foot too far over the line. You don't wait for disaster. You notice patterns. That night, I noticed a pattern forming. Nothing concrete. No messages discovered. No lipstick on collars. Just proximity, familiarity, language, and that comment. I'm taking your wife as my date tonight. If it had been a joke, she would have corrected it. If it had been harmless, she would have nudged him away. Instead, she said, "It's just networking." Just. That word can cover a lot of ground. I sat there at that round table with my phone recording under the cloth, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt like I was watching my marriage from the outside. Still calm, still composed, but no longer certain. I didn't confront her that night. That's important. I drove us home. Quiet. Highway mostly empty. Street lights flicking across the windshield in steady intervals, like a metronome. She kicked her heels off in the passenger seat and rubbed her toes together like she always does after events. She said the gala went well. I said, "That's good." That was it. But suspicion doesn't come in like a siren. It comes in pieces. Small, dull pieces that don't look dangerous until they start fitting together. The first piece came 3 days later. I was home between runs. Afternoon light through the blinds. I was in the garage reorganizing tools when her phone buzzed inside the house. Not unusual, but it buzzed again. And again. Rapid. I walked in for water. The phone was on the counter. Screen lit up. "Greg." 3 messages back to back. I didn't pick it up. I didn't touch it. I just saw his name and the preview line before it dimmed. "Still thinking about tonight." That's what it said. Or no. Wait. It said, "Still thinking about last night." Not tonight. Last night. Yeah. I stood there a second longer than I needed to. Refrigerator humming. Dishwasher mid-cycle. Normal house sounds. I told myself it could mean anything. Work debrief. Presentation ideas. But thinking about last night doesn't sound like spreadsheets. I went back to the garage. Picked up a wrench. Set it back down. Couldn't remember what I was fixing. When she came home later, I asked casually, "Busy day?" She nodded. Back-to-back meetings. I waited for her to mention him. She didn't. That's when suspicion shifted from abstract to specific. Not proof, just absence. A few days later, she told me she had a late client dinner. Same hotel, actually. Different event. She didn't ask if I wanted to come. Just said it was expected. Expected by who? I almost asked. Didn't. Instead, I checked our shared calendar. The dinner wasn't there. She usually put everything on that calendar. Even hair appointments. Maybe she forgot. Or maybe I was starting to look for things. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I parked 2 blocks from the hotel. I know how that sounds. I told myself I was just driving past. Just confirming it was really a company dinner. I didn't storm in. Didn't make a scene. I sat in my truck. Engine off. Windows cracked. February air cold enough to bite the inside of your nose. People went in wearing coats and came out an hour later laughing. I checked the time. 2 hours passed. Then I saw them. Not leaving with a group. Not surrounded by colleagues. Just the 2 of them. Walking slow. He wasn't touching her this time. Hands in his pockets. She was talking. Animated. One hand moving as she spoke. He leaned in to hear her better. They stopped under the awning. She laughed. He said something I couldn't hear. Then he reached up and tucked a loose strand of her hair behind her ear. That gesture. Small. Intimate. Practiced. She didn't step back. I felt something tighten behind my ribs. Not explosive. Just a pressure building. They didn't kiss. They didn't hold hands. They just stood there a second too long before separating. She got into her car. He watched her leave. I stayed parked. I remember thinking, maybe I misread it. Maybe that's how executives operate. Maybe I'm projecting road life simplicity onto a world that plays by different rules. But then I thought about the message. Still thinking about last night. And I had a choice forming in front of me. Trust what I've built for 15 years. Or trust what I just saw under that awning light. Confront her now and risk being wrong. Or wait and find out for sure. I didn't sleep much after that night. The house felt different. Same couch. Same ticking clock in the hallway. Same hum from the refrigerator. But it all sounded louder. Or maybe I was just listening harder. She came home around 10:30. Said dinner ran long. I nodded. Asked how it went. She said, "Productive." Productive. I watched her set her keys down. She didn't look nervous. Didn't avoid my eyes. If anything, she seemed relaxed. Calm in a way that almost made me doubt what I'd seen. Almost. The next morning, I left for a short haul. 2 states over. I told myself distance would clear my head. It didn't. Every mile marker felt like a countdown. When I stopped for fuel, I checked our phone plan app. Not something I'd ever done before. I had the login because I pay the bill. Her number showed frequent calls to one contact. Greg. Not during office hours. Late evenings. Early mornings. Short calls. 5 minutes. 7 minutes. 12. That's not proof of anything. Managers call employees. Strategy doesn't sleep. But strategy usually happens on company lines. I told myself I was crossing a line, that I was digging for something instead of letting it breathe. Still, I screenshotted the call log. Why? I don't know. Maybe I needed something solid, something I could look at without it shifting under me. A few days later, I came home earlier than expected. Delivery got rescheduled. I didn't tell her. I thought it would be nice. Surprise dinner. Maybe I was trying to reset something without admitting it. The house was quiet when I walked in. Not dark, just quiet. Her car was in the driveway. I set my keys down slow. Listened. Voices. Low. From the living room. I stepped forward and stopped at the edge of the hallway. I could see the back of the couch. Couldn't see faces. It wasn't a group voice. It was one man's voice. Greg. I recognized the tone. That steady, confident rhythm. I'd heard it enough at the gala. She laughed softly at something he said. Not a big laugh. The kind you use when someone says something only meant for you. My first thought wasn't rage. It was confusion. Why here? Why not a restaurant or an office? I stepped into the doorway. They both turned. He was sitting on my couch. Jacket off. Sleeves rolled up like he'd settled in. She stood up quickly. You're home early. Greg stood too. Smooth. No panic. Mickle, he said, like we were old friends. We were just reviewing a proposal. On my couch, with wine glasses on the coffee table. Red, half full. I looked at the proposal papers. They were there. Printed slides. Bullet points. Charts. But the space between them on that couch was closer than colleagues need. I said, didn't know meetings moved to the living room. She replied too fast. It was easier than the office. Easier. Greg grabbed his jacket. I should get going. He didn't rush. That's what stuck with me. He walked to the door like he belonged there. Like my house was an extension of his workspace. At the door, he paused. Looked at me. You've got a talented wife. Then he left. The door clicked shut. The engine of his car faded down the street. I stood there for a long moment. Could smell his cologne in the air. Sharp. Clean. Not cheap. She started talking. Explaining. Saying it was last-minute prep for a client pitch. Saying the office was booked. I asked one question. Why didn't you tell me he was coming over? She hesitated. Just a second. I didn't think it was a big deal. There it was. Not the meeting. Not the wine. The pause. I walked to the coffee table. Picked up one of the glasses. Still cool from her hand. There was a faint smudge of lipstick on the rim. I don't know why I noticed that. It was her shade. The deep red she wore to the gala. My phone was in my pocket again. I didn't take it out. Not yet. Instead, I looked at her. Really looked. Trying to read something I'd missed for months. She didn't look guilty. She looked irritated. Like I'd interrupted something routine. That's when the ground dropped. Not because I saw them kissing. Not because I caught them in bed. But because my home no longer felt like neutral ground. I went to the kitchen sink. Ran water. Let it drown out the silence. Behind me, she kept explaining. Words like professional, overthinking, insecure floated through the room. Insecure. I turned the faucet off. The quiet that followed was heavier than any shout. And for the first time, I wasn't just suspicious. I knew. I didn't yell. That surprised her more than anything. She was ready for a fight. I could see it in how her shoulders squared, like she was bracing for impact. But I didn't give her that. I walked past her, picked up the proposal papers from the coffee table, and stacked them neatly. The pages were warm from the room. slightly bent at the corners. Real work had been done on them. That much was true. I said, "How long has he been comfortable coming here?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "This was the first time." Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. I didn't push that point. Not yet. Instead, I asked something else. If I had a female supervisor sitting on our couch drinking wine while you were gone, would that feel normal to you? She didn't answer right away. That silence said more than any confession could have. I went outside after that. The air was cool. Early evening. Neighbor's dog barking 2 houses down. I leaned against my truck and looked at the sky turning that dull blue before dark. I've spent most of my life reacting fast. Weather shifts, traffic jams, engine problems. But this wasn't that kind of situation. This needed patience. I replayed everything. The Gala comment, the messages, the call logs, the awning light, the wine glasses. Nothing explosive, nothing undeniable, just a steady erosion. And here's where I had to be honest with myself. If I stormed into this accusing, she'd shut down. She'd paint me as jealous, controlling, the husband who doesn't understand ambition. If I ignored it, I'd be telling her, silently, that this was acceptable. Neither option sat right. So I chose a third one. Documentation. Not revenge. Not a public scene. Just clarity. I went back inside and told her calmly, "From now on, if he needs to meet, it's at the office, not here." She crossed her arms. "You don't get to dictate my career." "I'm not dictating your career," I said. "I'm setting boundaries in my house." That word landed. Boundaries. She looked away first. That night, after she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I organized what I had. Screenshots of call logs. The recording from the Gala. I listened to it again with headphones. Greg's voice was clear. "I'm taking your wife as my date tonight." The chuckles around us. Her response. "It's just networking." Hearing it again, isolated, stripped of the ballroom noise, it sounded different. Less playful. More declarative. I saved the file to a separate drive. Then I did something I hadn't considered before. I checked company policy. Most corporations have codes of conduct, conflict of interest guidelines, policies about supervisor-subordinate relationships. I wasn't looking for a smoking gun, just structure. There it was. Direct relationships between managers and direct reports must be disclosed to HR. I read that line 3 times. I wasn't planning to blow up her job. That wasn't my goal. But I needed to know what framework we were standing in. The next morning, I told her we needed to talk that weekend. Not argue. Talk. She rolled her eyes slightly. Not dramatically. Just enough. That small gesture told me something too. I realized then that this wasn't just about Greg. It was about respect. About whether my presence in her life still carried weight. I thought back to when we first got married. Small apartment. Second-hand couch. We used to sit on the floor and eat takeout because we didn't have a table yet. We built from nothing. Now we had granite counters and wine glasses for special occasions. Somewhere between then and now, the lines blurred. I asked myself a hard question while staring at the grain of the kitchen table. Was I reacting to betrayal or to being replaced in spaces I used to occupy? That's not the same thing. I'll admit something here. I wasn't completely sure whether what I was seeing qualified as an affair. Emotional? Maybe. Physical? I hadn't seen proof. But I did know this. A man felt comfortable enough to declare my wife as his date in public. Comfortable enough to sit on my couch with wine. Comfortable enough to text her late at night. Comfort like that doesn't grow overnight. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to verify. And if verification led somewhere ugly, I would handle it quietly. No shouting. No theatrics. Just facts. Tell me something. At what point does patience stop being strength and start becoming permission? Saturday came heavy. Gray sky. No sun. The kind of morning where the house stays dim even at 9. I made coffee. Didn't offer her any. She made her own. We sat at the kitchen table. Same table where we'd done taxes, birthday cards, grocery lists. The wood had a scratch near the center from when I dropped a wrench years ago. I stared at that scratch while I started. I'm going to ask you direct questions. I said. I need direct answers. She nodded. Not defensive. Not soft either. I placed my phone on the table between us. Screen dark. I didn't play anything yet. Are you involved with him? I asked. She inhaled slowly. Define involved. That right there. I felt my jaw tighten, but my voice stayed even. Emotionally. Physically. Either. She shook her head. No. He's my boss. He's important to my career. Important. I tapped the phone screen. The recording from the gala filled the kitchen. The line echoed off the cabinets. I'm taking your wife as my date tonight. Silence followed. Even the refrigerator seemed to pause. She looked at the phone. Then at me. That was a joke, she said. He introduced you as his date again later. It's branding, she replied. Optics. Optics. I slid printed call logs across the table. Not dramatically. Just flat. Why are there late-night calls? She didn't touch the papers. We were strategizing. At 11:47 p.m.? She hesitated. There it was again. I leaned back in my chair. Wood creaked under my weight. Did you tell him he couldn't come to our house again? Her eyes narrowed slightly. You're tracking this like I committed a crime. I'm tracking it because something feels off. She stood up then, pushed her chair back harder than necessary. You don't understand how this world works. Maybe I didn't, but I understood territory. I understood boundaries. I understood when another man starts acting like space belongs to him. I asked one more question. When he tucked your hair behind your ear outside that hotel, what was that? Her face changed. Not shock. Recognition. You followed me, she said quietly. The room shifted. I hadn't planned to reveal that yet. I miscalculated. Should have waited. No, maybe it didn't matter. Yes, I said. She stared at me like I'd crossed a line deeper than she had. You don't trust me. I paused there. And here's where I need to be honest. I wondered for a second if I had gone too far. Sitting in a truck 2 blocks away, checking phone logs, recording conversations. Was I protecting my marriage or dismantling it piece by piece? It's not a clean line. I looked at her and said, trust isn't the absence of questions. It's the presence of answers. She didn't respond. Instead, she said something that cut clean. I liked the attention. There it was. Not love. Not an affair confession. Just that. I like being seen. She added. He sees my potential. The air felt thinner. So do I said. And I meant it. But I realized in that moment that my support had been quiet. Practical. Bills paid. House steady. Maybe that didn't feel like being seen. She sank back into her chair. We haven't slept together, she said. If that's what you're asking. Haven't. Present tense. I noticed that. I stood up slowly. Walked to the sink. Ran water. Needed the sound. Then I turned it off. You need to decide, I said. Career ambition is fine. Attention is human. But blurred lines aren't. She didn't argue this time. We sat there, the scratch in the table between us like a fault line. No shouting. No dramatic exit. Just a quiet realization that something had shifted too far to pretend it hadn't. And I knew then the next move wasn't about catching them. It was about choosing whether this marriage still had 2 people guarding it. The house stayed quiet for a few days after that conversation. Not icy. Not explosive. Just measured. She went to work. I went on my runs. We moved around each other carefully, like furniture had been rearranged, and neither of us wanted to bump into a sharp corner. On Monday evening, she came home earlier than usual. No makeup. Hair pulled back. She set her purse down and sat at the kitchen table without turning the lights on. The room was dim except for the stove light. I told him we need boundaries, she said. I didn't answer right away. She continued. No more personal texts. No more after-hours calls unless it's urgent. And no meetings outside the office. Her voice wasn't defensive this time. It sounded tired. What did he say? I asked. He said he didn't realize it was crossing a line. That answer sat there. Greg didn't seem like a man who misreads lines. But maybe that's my bias talking. I've met confident men before who genuinely believe proximity equals permission. She added. He said he respects you. I let out a small breath through my nose. Not quite a laugh. Respect doesn't announce itself at galas. But I didn't say that. Over the next few weeks, things shifted in subtle ways. The late-night phone buzzes stopped. Her phone stayed face up on the counter again. She started adding work events back to the shared calendar. Small corrections. One night, she asked if I'd come to another company function. I hesitated. Then I said yes. This one was smaller. Conference room. Catered trays. No ballroom lighting. Greg was there. He nodded at me. Shook my hand. Firm grip. Neutral eye contact. He introduced her as our lead strategist. Not his date. That mattered. It didn't erase what had happened, but it mattered. At home, we talked more. Not about him every time. About us. About how different our worlds felt. About how my support had been steady, but maybe too quiet. I told her something I hadn't admitted before, that watching her in those rooms made me feel replaceable. I almost said small. That's not the right word. It wasn't about size. It was about relevance. Replaceable fits better. She said she never intended that she'd gotten caught up in being noticed in ways she hadn't felt in years. We didn't solve everything in one night. That's not how it works. Trust doesn't snap back like a rubber band. It rebuilds like drywall, slow, layered, messy underneath. There were still moments I'd catch myself checking the phone log app out of habit. I stopped after a while, not because I forgot, but because constantly monitoring felt like keeping a wound open. I'll admit something here I'm not proud of. I considered emailing HR anonymously, just to force distance. I even drafted it once. Sat there staring at the screen. Then I deleted it, because if I had to police her environment for her to stay loyal, then we had a different problem entirely. That realization changed something in me. About 3 months later, she requested a transfer to a different department. Same company, different leadership. She said she needed a fresh start professionally. I didn't push that idea. It came from her. The day she moved offices, she came home carrying a small box with her desk plant and framed photos. She set the photo of us, taken at a lake years ago, back on the mantel. It had been on her desk the whole time, she said. I believed her. Or maybe I chose to. Sometimes belief is a decision. Looking back now, I ask myself whether I would handle it differently. Would I still record the Gala comment? Yes. Would I park 2 blocks away and watch? I'm not sure. Part of me thinks that moment outside the hotel told me everything I needed to know. Another part wonders if I crossed into territory that made repair harder. There's a fine line between vigilance and surveillance. I don't claim I walked it perfectly. What I do know is this. Confrontation without control would have destroyed us faster than any flirtation could. We didn't come out of it triumphant. There was no dramatic apology scene. No vows renewed under candlelight. Just 2 people sitting at a scratched kitchen table choosing, slowly, to guard the same ground again. And that choice had to be mutual. Every day. It's been a while now. Over a year. The house feels normal again. Not perfect. Just lived in. The dishwasher still makes that rattling sound when it hits the dry cycle. My truck still cools with that ticking metal sound at night. She still leaves sticky notes on the fridge when I'm heading out before dawn. Life didn't reset. It adjusted. Greg moved to another region eventually. Promotion, I heard. We didn't celebrate that news. We didn't need to. Her transfer stuck. New department. New supervisor. A woman this time. I met her once at a holiday mixer. Straightforward. No lingering gestures. No performance. But here's the thing nobody really talks about. Even when the outside threat fades, the memory of it doesn't disappear overnight. There were months where I'd catch myself noticing small things. How long she was on a call. Whether a text buzzed after 10. Not obsessively. Just aware. Awareness leaves a residue. I had to decide whether I wanted to live in that residue or clean it up. Trust isn't something you demand back like borrowed money. It's something you extend again carefully, even when your pride tells you not to. There were evenings we sat on the back porch without talking much. The porch light flickers sometimes. Been meaning to fix that. The air would smell like cut grass from the neighbor's yard. Ordinary smells. Ordinary sounds. That ordinariness started to feel valuable. I realized something during one of those quiet nights. The Gala comment wasn't the real fracture. It was just the spotlight. The fracture had started earlier, when ambition and validation weren't being discussed openly between us. I had assumed my steady presence was enough. She had assumed my steadiness meant I didn't need reassurance. Two different assumptions. Same silence. I won't pretend I handled everything perfectly. I recorded. I monitored. I followed. Those aren't small things. They shift dynamics. But I also didn't explode. I didn't humiliate her publicly. I didn't let pride make permanent decisions in temporary confusion. That matters too. People sometimes ask, well, not directly, but in comments, in messages, did she cheat? The honest answer? Not physically, as far as I know. Emotionally, she stepped closer to a line than she should have. And I stepped closer to one too. Because once you start watching instead of talking, you're already drifting. If I've learned anything, it's this. Loyalty isn't tested in dramatic betrayals most of the time. It's tested in small permissions, in how comfortable someone becomes crossing a line you never clearly drew. And self-respect isn't loud. It's quiet boundaries enforced without spectacle. Let me ask you something. If someone publicly claims a piece of your life like it belongs to them, and the person beside you doesn't immediately correct it, what does that say? About them, about you, about the space between you. There isn't one right answer. Some people would have walked away that night. Some would have confronted the boss in the ballroom. Some would have ignored it entirely. I chose documentation, conversation, boundaries, not because I'm smarter, just because I needed clarity more than I needed drama. And clarity isn't flashy. It's slow. It's uncomfortable. It forces you to look at your own blind spots too. If you're listening to this and you're in something similar, ask yourself whether you're reacting to ego or to erosion. Those aren't the same. Ego wants a scene. Erosion wants repair. I'm not here to tell you which path guarantees happiness. I'm just telling you what kept my house standing. It wasn't control. It wasn't intimidation. It was two people deciding that attention from outside the marriage wasn't worth losing the ground inside it. That decision has to be mutual. Every time. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. Respect isn't what someone says in a crowded room. It's what they refuse to allow when it matters.